The cake was still half frozen when she shoved it into the fridge. "I'm already late," she snapped, struggling to zip up the back of her wine-colored dress. "If you cared about me at all, you'd stop making everything about you." I hadn't said a word. Not one. Just stood there holding the lighter for the candles she asked me to pick up. Vanilla scented. 20 of them, even though it wasn't her birthday. The party wasn't for her. It was for her boss. But you wouldn't know it from how she twirled in the hallway mirror like she was auditioning for a perfume commercial. Her phone buzzed. Then again. And again. Her smile widened each time, never once looking my way. When she grabbed her keys off the counter, I noticed her ring was gone. "Forgot something?" I asked gently. Stupidly. She glanced at me, then at her empty ring finger. "Oh," she said. "Just oh. Then, it doesn't match the dress." She left the house in a cloud of perfume and silence. No goodbye, no see you later. The sound of the door closing behind her felt heavier than it should have. I stood there in a button-down shirt she'd ironed that morning, back when we were still pretending things were fine. A small folding table was already set up in the living room, where I thought we might at least have a slice of that half-frozen cake together after the party. She promised she'd be back before midnight. She wasn't. At 2:11 a.m., the front door finally opened. I heard her heels first, not walking but stumbling. Then her laugh. Not hers alone. Another voice followed. Male. Confident. The kind of voice that walks into places without knocking. My stomach dropped. They paused in the hallway. Whispered. Giggles. The sound of her hand slapping his chest. Playful, like she used to do with me. Then, silence. Then the door closed again. They never made it into our bedroom. She left with him after a few minutes. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window until morning, gripping the lighter she never took from me. When the sun came up, I finally stood, walked to her closet, and pulled out the white shoebox she hid at the back. The one with old concert tickets, notes I wrote her years ago, and a small hotel keycard I wasn't supposed to know about. That's when I decided. If she wanted to act like I was invisible, fine. I'd vanish so completely she'd forget how my voice sounded. I left before she got back. But what I did first, that's what she'll never forget. I didn't leave a note. I didn't scream or smash things. I didn't go through her phone or scroll through social media like some jealous cliché. Instead, I went quiet. It's funny how silence cuts deeper than shouting when someone expects a scene. And that's what she wanted, I think, drama. Attention. A man who would chase her down and beg her to come home. But I didn't give her that. I gave her a ghost. Before I left the house, I laid out everything neatly on the kitchen table, not to make a statement, but because I was tired of being the one living in chaos. I placed her forgotten ring inside the ceramic bowl where we usually kept spare keys. Next to it, I set the hotel key card I'd found months ago buried in the back of her closet. She never knew I'd seen it. It had the logo of that rooftop hotel in the city, the one she claimed she stayed at for a conference mixer. I also left the charger she always steals from my side of the bed, just so she wouldn't accuse me later of being petty. And finally, I placed the unopened cake, still half frozen, in the center of the table. Candles in the shape of question marks poked into the icing. It looked ridiculous and tragic all at once. I didn't know where I was going at first. I drove with no direction, just some motel playlist humming through the speakers and my thoughts eating themselves alive. I ended up in a diner a couple towns over, ordering pancakes I didn't touch. It was almost noon when I got the first message. Just one word. Where? I turned off my phone. By evening, I checked into a small coastal inn. No ocean view, just a parking lot and a flickering neon sign outside my window. But it was quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in yesterday's clothes, and stared at the blank television screen until the room got dark. At 2 a.m., I turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls. 21 messages. Some angry. Some fake calm. One was just a photo of her standing in our living room next to the table I'd set up. The cake had melted. The candles had sagged. She wrote, "What is this?" I didn't respond. The next morning, she called again. I picked up. She didn't expect that. Her voice was tight. Controlled. "Where did you go?" she asked. "No, are you okay?" "No, I'm sorry." "You looked beautiful last night," I said. He seemed to think so too. Silence. Then she said, "So you were spying?" I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "You brought him to our door, Della. You weren't even trying to hide it." She scoffed. Actually scoffed. "It was a ride." He offered. "You're twisting things." "Then what was so funny in the hallway?" I asked. What were you whispering about while I sat in our bedroom waiting to say goodnight? More silence. Then, you're being dramatic. Dramatic. That word. That stupid word. As if what I felt was some performance. As if I hadn't spent years making excuses for her coldness, telling myself she was just tired or stressed or focused on her career. She said she was coming to find me. I told her not to bother. I didn't give her the name of the inn. I didn't tell her anything. I just ended the call. But later that day, as I sat in the tiny cafe next to the inn, sipping bitter coffee and trying not to cry in public, I saw her through the window. She was outside, scanning faces, holding something in her hand. When she finally saw me, her whole body froze. Her lips parted slightly, like she had rehearsed something but forgot the lines. I didn't move. I just watched her stand there, uncertain for the first time in years. She came in slowly, like she was afraid I'd run. And then she sat down across from me, without asking. Her first words were, "You're making this bigger than it is." I looked at her. Not the woman I married, not the woman I fought for, but the woman who traded secrets in my hallway and thought I wouldn't notice. "You think this is about last night?" I asked quietly. She blinked. "Isn't it?" "No," I said. "It's about the last 2 years." She didn't respond. Just looked down at the paper bag in her lap. "I brought your sweater," she said, like that fixed anything. I didn't even glance at it. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. She still didn't think she'd done anything wrong. The silence between us at that cafe table stretched like a rubber band about to snap. She kept adjusting her sleeves, glancing around as if hoping someone might interrupt us and end the discomfort. I just sat there, watching her. Not with rage. Not even hurt anymore. Something colder had settled in. A kind of numb clarity. The kind you get when you stop waiting for someone to come back and finally admit they left a long time ago. "You think I planned any of this?" she asked, her voice cracking for the first time. "You're acting like I did something unforgivable." I gave a small laugh. It wasn't even bitter. Just tired. "You didn't do one thing. You did 1,000 small things." I just finally noticed. She opened her mouth to say something but closed it again. Her fingers tapped nervously on the side of her coffee cup. The same fingers that used to trace little circles on my arm when we watched movies. Now they shook. I leaned forward a little. You know what really hit me? It wasn't the hotel key. It wasn't the guy in the hallway. It wasn't even your text telling me not to wait up. I paused, letting that last part settle. Then I said, "It was the way you walked past the dinner table and didn't even glance at the plate I made for you. Like I didn't exist. Like I hadn't waited all day just to share 30 minutes with you." She blinked hard, swallowing whatever argument she had prepared. Still, she tried to pivot. "Lowell, couples grow apart sometimes. It doesn't mean." "Did you love him?" I asked. My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. She froze. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. And that said everything. I nodded slowly. "Right." She whispered, "It wasn't like that." I leaned back in my chair, looked out the window at the parking lot, and said, "Then tell me what it was like. Describe it to me in a way that doesn't make me want to set fire to everything I believed about us." She was quiet for so long, I almost thought she'd gotten up and left. Then she said something I wasn't ready for. "I don't know who I am with you anymore." It landed like a slap I couldn't dodge. And the worst part? Some buried, pathetic part of me understood what she meant. I'd been so careful, so gentle, always asking, always accommodating, always giving more room when she needed space. And somehow, instead of feeling seen, she felt erased. Or maybe that was just her excuse. She pulled out her phone and tapped something. A moment later, she slid it across the table. "This is the event calendar from the company's shared drive. You can see where I was, what I was doing. You'll see I wasn't lying about most of it." "Most of it," I repeated. "I didn't plan to hurt you, Lowell. It just happened." He made me feel. She cut herself off. Realized too late that finishing that sentence would be worse than silence. I stared at the screen, then back at her. You know, I kept wondering if it was me. If I wasn't enough. If I'd let myself go or gotten too boring. But it's not about being enough, is it? You just stopped seeing me. She looked down, ashamed but not apologetic. That distinction mattered. I could have forgiven shame, but not that stubborn refusal to accept what she'd done. I stood up. She looked up at me like I'd just dropped something valuable on the floor. "Are you leaving?" she asked. I nodded. "I already left. You're just catching up." She didn't follow me. Not out of pride. Out of paralysis. Because for the first time, I don't think she knew what came next. She'd always been in control, the cooler one, the decisive one. And now I had done something unpredictable. I walked away first. But I didn't go back to the inn. I went somewhere else. And where I ended up, and who I ran into, it changed everything I thought I knew about the truth behind that night. I didn't plan to walk anywhere. I really didn't. But after I left that cafe, my legs just kept moving. I couldn't go back to the inn, not yet. That place already felt haunted by my own thoughts. And I wasn't ready to sit in a room full of stale air and bad lighting while replaying every word she'd just said like some sad movie stuck on repeat. So I just kept walking past the harbor, past the little art gallery with the closed for renovations sign, past everything that reminded me I was still wearing the same shirt from 2 days ago. I felt like a ghost in my own life. I ended up at the park by the marina. I hadn't been there in years. It was the kind of place families came to feed ducks and eat dripping ice cream cones, not where broken-down men went to nurse their heartaches. But there I was, sitting on a crooked bench by the water, staring out at the docked sailboats like they might have answers. That's when I saw him. I didn't recognize him at first. He had on a gray beanie and aviator sunglasses, not the kind of look you forget if you've seen it before. But there was something familiar about the way he moved. Confident. Too confident. He passed me, slowed down, then turned around and came back. "You're Lowell, right?" he said. My entire body froze. "Yeah." He pulled off his sunglasses. The smile he gave me wasn't smug, it was measured, calculated. And that made it worse. "I'm Braylon. I work with Della," he said, extending his hand. I didn't take it. He nodded, like he expected that. Figured we'd bump into each other eventually. "What do you want?" I asked. He shrugged. "Nothing, really. I was just nearby. Thought you might want the truth, since she's not exactly generous with it." My pulse kicked up. "You're the one from the hallway." He smirked slightly. "I was one of them." The sentence hit like a brick to the stomach. "One of them." I repeated, stunned. He sat down beside me without asking, like we were old friends catching up. "She's got a pattern. Your wife. I mean, ex-wife, soon enough, right?" I clenched my fists. "You have no right." "I'm not here to fight," he said calmly. "I'm here because you deserve to know that you weren't crazy. She made you feel like you were imagining things, didn't she? All those nights she came home late, all the parties she told you not to come to, the work trips that magically popped up after a minor argument. It wasn't you. It was always her." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just stared straight ahead, breathing through my nose like I was trying not to drown. He continued. "She used me, and I let her. She told me things that made me think you were some checked-out husband who didn't care. That you were cold, controlling, even. She painted herself like a victim." He paused. But then I saw her texts. She was playing both sides, making me feel like I was rescuing her, while stringing you along like a safety net. I couldn't believe I was sitting there, letting this man tell me everything I'd been too afraid to confirm. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to thank him. I wanted to throw myself into the water and disappear. "I ended it weeks ago," Braylon said. She got angry. Really angry. "That's when she started getting close with Kennedy's brother, the guy from last night. I figured you had a right to know." I closed my eyes. It was worse than I thought. She hadn't just cheated once. It wasn't a mistake. It was a lifestyle. "You ever wonder why she stopped laughing around you?" he asked softly. I opened my eyes and looked at him. "It's not because you changed," he said. "It's because she got addicted to being new to someone. That's not your fault." I didn't say anything. What could I say? That I'd suspected it deep down but kept pretending we were just having a rough patch? That I'd spent months trying to be the version of me she might still love? Braylon stood up and pulled something from his coat, a flash drive. "I backed up the messages," he said. "You're gonna want these when she tries to spin her story." He set it on the bench beside me, then gave one final nod and walked away like he hadn't just dropped a bomb into the ruins of my life. I sat there with the flash drive in my hand for nearly an hour, debating what to do. Part of me didn't want to look. I was already broken. What else was there to destroy? But then I thought of that dinner plate, the one she never touched. And I knew I had to see. What I found on that drive, and what I did with it, would tear everything wide open. I sat on that bench long after Braylon disappeared down the path. The flash drive in my hand felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't just plastic and metal. It was loaded with the kind of truth you don't come back from. I didn't go back to the inn. I didn't call anyone. I didn't eat. I walked until my feet hurt, checked into a cheap chain motel just off the highway, and sat at the desk with a borrowed laptop from the front desk clerk who didn't ask questions. The moment I plugged in the drive, I wanted to pull it right back out. But I didn't. I clicked the folder named Proof, and it opened like a trapdoor beneath everything I thought I still had left to protect. The first thing I saw was a spreadsheet: dates, times, names. I scanned them, thinking maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Braylon was just trying to hurt her. Then I clicked the folder labeled Messages. She had dozens of text threads, but only a few names repeated. Braylon was one of them. But so was someone saved under just a single letter, T. I started with Braylon. The early messages were what you'd expect: casual flirting, shared jokes about coworkers, playful banter that could have easily passed as innocent. But then it escalated. It always escalates. She started complaining about me in tiny, passive-aggressive ways. He gets so emotional. I can't breathe sometimes. Lowell made lasagna again tonight. Like that fixes anything. I feel like I'm married to a wall. Except walls don't sulk. There it was. The version of me she sold to someone else. Not the man who rubbed her feet after 10-hour shifts or stayed up to watch her favorite shows even though I hated them. No. In her narrative, I was a burden. A whining ghost haunting her party. Then came the photos. Not explicit, but enough. A picture of her legs draped over Braylon's lap in a dark corner booth. A selfie from her hotel bed, lips pouted, eyes heavy. One photo was taken in our house. Our bedroom mirror. My reflection barely visible in the background, brushing my teeth. That one broke me. Then I opened the T thread, and I froze. It was Kennedy's brother, Tyler, the one I saw her leave with that night. Their messages weren't emotional like Braylon's. They were transactional. Cold. Arrangements. Coordinates. And worse, comments about me. Jokes. Laughing at how clueless I was. He actually left food out for you? LMAO. He's probably journaling about it right now. You're doing him a favor. Delegate guy needs to be put out of his misery. I slammed the laptop shut. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it had a fist inside it, squeezing tighter with every passing second. I didn't cry. I wish I had. I just sat there, shaking, the kind of shaking that comes when your nervous system goes into shock. And in the quiet of that motel room, I realized something I hadn't dared to admit until that moment. She didn't just cheat on me. She dismantled me. She'd been slowly taking apart the man I was, peeling me layer by layer in whispers and texts and jokes shared in the backseat of someone else's car. But the worst part? I had helped her. I made it easy. I stayed kind. I stayed soft. I stayed available. I was the emotional welcome mat she wiped her feet on every time she came home from someone else's arms. I stood up and paced the room. My thoughts were racing, burning, spiraling. I wasn't thinking revenge. Not yet. I wasn't thinking confrontation, either. I was thinking clarity. I needed to see her, not to yell, not to argue, but to look her in the eyes one last time and find out if she was even capable of shame. The next morning, I drove back into town and waited outside her office building. I sat in my car and watched as she walked out for lunch with coworkers, smiling like nothing had happened. Like my world hadn't collapsed. Like I wasn't 500 feet away with all her lies sitting on a USB drive in my glove compartment. I didn't get out. I waited until they all disappeared into the restaurant. Then I walked across the street, up the front steps, and into the building. I approached the receptionist and gave her my best calm smile. "I'm here to drop something off for Della," I said. She nodded and handed me a visitor pass. I went up to her floor, walked through the open-plan office until I reached her desk, and set the flash drive right in the center. On top of it, I placed a single sheet of paper. It read, "This is who you really are. Now everyone will know." Then I walked out, past the fake ferns and framed mission statements, out into the afternoon sunlight that suddenly felt a little less cold. I didn't stick around to see her find it. I didn't need to. There are moments you don't have to witness to know exactly how they'll play out. I could already imagine the flicker of confusion on her face when she saw the drive, the quick scan of her surroundings to make sure no one was watching too closely, the brief hesitation before plugging it into her work laptop. I could practically hear the silence that would fall over her desk as her world began cracking, one thread of truth at a time. By the time she would read my note, I'd already left the building. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. I didn't look back. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun and kept moving until the cold glass towers behind me blurred into background noise. I had nowhere to be. I just knew I couldn't be near her when she exploded. And explode she would. I went to a public library, of all places. Sat in the back near the nonfiction section, pretending to read something about bird migration while checking my phone every 10 minutes. And then, right on cue, the storm hit. 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails, then 8 texts in a row. What is this? You're sick. This is my job, Lowell. You don't get to humiliate me like this. Delete it right now. We need to talk. Come home. Now. You're going to regret this. Lowell. She always used my name like a threat when she felt cornered. But it didn't work this time. Nothing she could say would erase what I saw in those messages, or what I'd felt watching her laugh with another man 10 feet from our bedroom door. I silenced my phone and slid it into my jacket pocket. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vengeance. I felt empty, like I was finally standing on the other side of a door I had spent years knocking on. An hour later, a friend of mine, Terry, texted me out of the blue. Dude, your wife is trending in the internal Slack at her company. I blinked at the message. My heart stalled for a moment. What do you mean? I replied. He sent back a screenshot. Someone from her office had apparently opened the flash drive on a shared machine before she could stop it. Her texts, the hotel key photo, the candid pictures with Braylon and the guy from the party, all of it ended up in a folder that synced to a shared network before she could shut it down. The messages were brutal. The photo from our bedroom mirror? That one had apparently caused gasps in their Monday stand-up meeting. I didn't know whether to be horrified or relieved. Both, maybe. I never meant to nuke her reputation. I just wanted her to see it, to sit with the weight of it for once. But now it was a wildfire, and I wasn't sure where it would stop. That night, she showed up at the motel. I didn't hear a knock. I heard pounding, the kind that rattles the cheap artwork off the wall. I opened the door slowly. There she was, hair wild, eyes red, cheeks flushed like she'd just come in from a storm. She barged past me before I could speak, pacing the small room like a caged animal. You're trying to ruin me, she hissed. I didn't respond. You have no idea what you've done, she said, whirling around to face me. I've worked for years to build what I have. And you just, what? Threw it away to prove a point. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Calmly. Tiredly. No, Della. You threw it away. All I did was hold up the mirror. She stared at me like I was speaking a language she didn't understand. You don't get to act like a victim, I continued. You called me pathetic behind my back. You said I was miserable to be around. You made fun of the way I cooked for you, the way I waited up. You made me feel like I was too much just for caring. And now that people actually see who you are, you're upset. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted around the room like she was looking for an exit that didn't exist. I didn't mean for it to get shared, I said. But honestly, I don't care anymore. I spent so long trying to protect your image while you slowly erased mine. She sat down, finally. Her voice broke a little when she said, I didn't know how to ask for what I wanted. And so you cheated? I said, no, she said quickly. It wasn't about that. She looked away. I felt alive again. Like someone saw me. The worst part was, I believed her. That's what made it so much worse. She wasn't some villain in a storybook. She was a real person who made selfish choices because she didn't want to admit she was unhappy. And I had let it fester, thinking that silence was safer than confrontation. She stood again, walked to the door. But before she left, she turned to me and asked something that twisted the knife. Are you going to tell your parents? I stared at her for a long moment before answering. I don't think they'd be surprised. Then she left, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was the one abandoned. It was strange how quiet everything got after she left the motel room. There had been all this chaos, noise, exposure, and then suddenly, silence. Like the whole storm had passed and I was standing in the ruins with no wind left in the air. That night, I didn't check my phone. I didn't reread her messages or scroll through her photos again. I just lay on the motel bed, staring at the textured ceiling, thinking about how many things I'd missed, how many signs I'd excused, how many nights I'd convinced myself love was supposed to feel like waiting. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went home. Not to her. Not to our home. I drove out to the old farmhouse where I grew up. My parents still lived there. The paint was faded and the porch sagged a little, but it was safe. It smelled like wood and lemon cleaner and quiet evenings. My mom opened the door like she'd been expecting me, even though I hadn't called. She didn't ask questions at first. She just pulled me into the kitchen, poured me a cup of coffee, and sat across from me like we were just picking up an old conversation we'd paused years ago. I told her everything. Not the details, I didn't need to, but the truth. About Della. About the hallway. About the flash drive. About how tired I was from pretending that love meant swallowing your voice until there was nothing left to say. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she looked at me and said, "You didn't lose her, honey. You lost the version of her you built in your mind. That version was never real. And that's not your fault." That sentence hit harder than anything Della had ever said. Because it was true. I stayed there for 3 nights. No emails. No social media. Just morning walks, long showers, and the kind of peace you only notice when it replaces constant anxiety. On the 4th day, my dad handed me an envelope. Inside was a key, his key to their lake cabin, a little place they hadn't visited in years. He just said, "Sometimes a man needs to hear himself think." So I drove up. And on the way, something happened. At a gas station just outside the county line, I saw Kennedy. Alone. I almost turned around. But she saw me first. She walked over slowly, holding her phone like a shield. "Lowell," she said, "can we talk for a second?" I didn't know what to expect. I'd always thought she barely remembered my name. But in that moment, she looked more nervous than I'd ever seen her. "I had no idea," she said. "I swear to you, I didn't know what Della was doing." She said you were okay with the open thing. My stomach turned. "The what?" Kennedy's eyes went wide. "You didn't." "Oh my God." She said you had some kind of arrangement. That you were both free to do whatever as long as you didn't talk about it. I swear that's what she told us. I never would have let her bring guys around if I knew. I cut her off. "She used you." She nodded, lips pressed into a line. "She used everyone. And now she's panicking." HR pulled her from the Wilcox event. They're reviewing her position. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Kennedy looked at me like she wanted to apologize for something that wasn't hers to fix. "For what it's worth," she said, "you deserved better. Everyone sees that now. Even the ones who laughed behind your back." I didn't reply. I just thanked her, got in the car, and drove off with my hands trembling on the wheel. That night, I sat on the cabin porch overlooking the lake. No reception. No lights but the moon. I thought about who I used to be before I wrapped my identity around being someone else's husband. I thought about the long months I spent trying to be softer, quieter, more agreeable. And I realized something that made my throat tighten. She didn't fall out of love with me. She fell out of love with the version of herself that loved me. And instead of facing that, she destroyed the bridge between us and blamed me for the fire. That night, I wrote her one last message. I didn't send it. I just wrote it and read it out loud to myself. "I hope one day you understand what you walked away from. Not because I want you back, but because I want you to feel the weight of what it means to be loved unconditionally and still choose dishonesty over vulnerability." I folded it up and burned it in the fireplace. And for the first time in years, I slept without clenching my jaw. I never expected peace to feel so unfamiliar. I thought moving on would be some grand explosion, some dramatic finale with fire and shouting and a door slammed so hard it echoed for months. But the truth? The truth was quiet. It was waking up and not feeling the urge to check if she'd texted. It was sipping coffee without imagining her walking through the door. It was finally remembering how to breathe without bracing for another emotional punch. Della did reach out one last time. A simple email. No subject. Just 5 lines that read, "I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong. I didn't know what I had. I hope you're okay. Please don't hate me." I didn't respond. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't. I'd spent so long trapped in the cycle of trying to make someone love me the way I loved them. I forgot that love without respect isn't love, it's sacrifice. And I was done bleeding for someone who didn't notice the wounds. Weeks passed. The cabin became more than a hiding place. It became a home. I fixed things. Small things at first. A loose stairboard. A leaking faucet. Then bigger things. I stripped the old paint off the porch rail and repainted it navy blue. I cooked meals without setting a place for someone who wasn't coming. I started hiking again, taking a camera with me, capturing the things I used to pass by too fast to see. And slowly, I remembered who I was before I became just her husband. One morning, I stopped by a local co-op to grab some supplies, and I met someone. Her name was Elise. She worked there part-time while writing her thesis on forest ecosystems. She had a laugh that didn't make me feel like a joke. We talked about books and black coffee and why frogs disappear after storms. I didn't flirt. I wasn't ready. But I listened. She listened back. And for the first time in a long time, someone looked at me like I wasn't a shadow. I didn't tell her about Della. Not then. Maybe not for a long while. But as we stood outside that shop talking about nothing and everything, I felt something new rising from the ruins, hope. It wasn't flashy. It didn't come with closure or guarantees. But it was mine. I'd earned it. I used to think that love meant never giving up on someone. But now I understand that real love, the kind you give to yourself, means knowing when enough is enough. It means letting go of someone who wouldn't stop hurting you, even when all you ever wanted was to help them feel whole. I'm not whole yet, but I'm not broken anymore either. And that feels like a beginning.